Stream is live. Live is stream.
Put your phones on do not disturb.
We are live.
Welcome to the Freedom to Thrive, a podcast that dives deep into the fight for abolition, reimagines justice, and explores the intersection of immigration and the criminal legal system, starting with this series that we call Crimmigration, brought to you by Freedom to Thrive, an organization here to challenge the status quo, dismantle oppressive systems, and build a world where our communities can truly thrive. Each episode in the series, we sit down with powerful voices from organizers to activists, community leaders, and allies who are leading the charge for change. We'll unpack the real impact of our current systems, discuss the importance of abolition, and share the tools, strategies needed to organize for a more just future. Whether you're new to this movement or a seasoned advocate, the space is for you. Our work is led and informed by people directly impacted by the immigration or prison system, who have been or have had loved ones deported or locked up. Their experiences with crimmigration is also impacted by the intersections of race, gender, housing, education, and labor. Join us to decriminalize, reparate, and liberate our communities. This is Freedom to Thrive. Let's get started.
Hello.
God, I love that beat, man. Hello. 616 in LA by Kendrick Lamar. What an amazing beat.
2320 in New York.
How you all doing?
I'm all right, man. Got the blues today, but we'll share that a little bit later on in the podcast.
We will. Welcome to episode 2, season 2 of the Freedom to Thrive podcast. Thanks for those who are watching this, wherever you are. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll put a link tree so you can subscribe to our other platforms and our newsletter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Today's episode, it's actually going to be one of two parts. We're going to be going into, definitely we're diving in with the issues of speaking frankly about what's happened with folks like Mahmoud Khalil and how the persecution has been kind of raising its skill level. So basically, today's spot is about the persecution of activism in migrant communities and movement builders and leaders. And it's going to be a 2-part series because we want to be able to come back with a guest and in our following podcast after this to kind of expand on this. But today we're going to keep it in-house. It's going to be the three of us today discussing some stuff, but we wanted to kind of lead with this beautiful op-ed that Mahmoud Khalil put out in what he calls a letter to Colombia, and it was published in the Columbia Spectator. Yeah, how'd you guys feel about it? Did you get to read it?
Yeah, I read it. I read it, and I'm also looking at the climate of what's going on and the history of student protests. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
going back to the 1960s, right?
Yes, sir.
Just from my history lessons, but also students protesting anywhere in any country, and not not want to say the word martyr, but his education and his knowledge and his background and where he's at, the injustices that he's seeing in detention, uh, raises for advocacy, not just with Palestine, but also in immigration detention. And him also speaking to about multiple demographics, people that he's encountered in detention, and him being vocal is something that I feel like we have to collectively get behind, right? When the younger generation uh, is is taking a fight, not being quiet, not being silent about what's going on, regardless of what his circumstances are. Um, I think that's a lot of what I take him still calling out, you know, these different administrations, these different institutions, and I think a big thing from that is let's say it's a whistleblower, right? So there we know that whistleblowers have some type of legal protection for calling those things out. So let's see what his attorneys do when it comes to any kind of backlash and retaliation and how they frame that, because we want to play both sides of organizing and the legal aspect. So I definitely want to see what folks have to say and bring to the table to support them.
Yeah, I mean, before I say anything, I should say that our uh, um, friend Kay, who's usually here with us, uh, couldn't participate in the podcast today because she has some health challenges. But we're hoping that she's back for our next episode when we'll have guests who actually put a spotlight on the systems and who have studied these things, um, and who are people who lead in the communities that are most affected. So stay tuned for part two of this conversation. I would say that for me, the letter and the case of this student, raised a lot of things in my head. You know, Number one, you know, allegedly he was
Allegedly.
allegedly right was
Allegedly.
was arrested, detained because of what he wrote and his actions around you know uh, protesting, calling out what's going on around the Palestinian Israeli conflict. But it just makes me think, well, we really need to know what is the genesis of that conflict, right? Like historically, like what can we learn from that, and why is it that people like him are saying today, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is not the kind of world we want to live in. Um, you know, there's all kinds of debates and conversations about how ideologies that have tried to shape the world in the past, that have led to wars, literally, are coming back. Fascism, colonialism, what do they even mean? But how do I express today in our current political, economic, and media systems? How is it people are talking about this or not talking about this? And then you get to the other aspect. It's not just him. It's people that have similar views or people that outright are opposed to the way that our government is operating. Is this a constitutional crisis? I mean, what about the Constitution? What about the constitutional rights of people, of freedom of speech? All the things that are supposed to protect us when we dissent, when we are active and want social justice. Uh, Obviously, and sadly, there's a lot of impact on our people in many different ways. Uh, and I wonder, what's the end game? What's the ultimate goal? What have we learned from history?
Yeah.
But there's also like, what do we do? Like, how do we push back? Who is pushing back today, and why are they pushing back? Despite the idea that you may be next, right?
Yeah. In regards to like pushing back, I think that's always like the question historically that we're always dealing with. And it always kind of circles back to like how we're always told that what's happening in and now is happening only now. And if you look at media, if you look at the media as a whole, you look at CNN, you look at MSNBC, fuck Fox, but like you look at all these entities and they're all talking about everything that's happening in the moment as if it's only going to be in this moment, and we don't talk about a historical perspective. God forbid we talk about Palestine in a historical perspective. God forbid we talk about homophobia and anti-LGBTQIA sentiment as a historical perspective. God forbid we talk about any of these stuff. God forbid we use history to better understand why these cycles continue to repeat and how we end it. So they won't popularize that in the broader media. And if you look at how they're even framing Khalil, even right now, like Fox News, they had like, if you people who don't know, I just tell them Google and start picking your sources. More like DuckDuckGo, if you guys can. Let's even get rid of the term of Googling. But if folks just look it up, then they'll see, headlines, and you kind of pick and choose and use a level of intelligence, whatever limited folks have sometimes nowadays. But Fox News, they call him Ivy League anti-Israel ringleader Mahmoud Khalil withheld details from foreign ties from visa application. Uh, colon the feds. That's a headline. You know, Ivy League anti-Israel ringleader. This guy is he's a permanent legal resident of the
So
U.S., a grad student, and was just a spokesperson for an organic campus-led activism on Columbia University. Like
can, can I
nothing
jump?
more than that, right? But they call him a ringleader. Fire away, bro.
I want to jump in and break that down. What they're trying to say, right? So when they say withheld, right, they are talking about his application on his visa application, where they asked him, does he have any ties to any terrorist groups, organizations, anything of that nature, right? This is a person that was born in a Syrian refugee camp to Palestinian parents, based on my research. Um,
Yep.
so, where are the ties to Hamas that you want to claim that he's supporting this? If he grew up in a different country, right? What are the ties? Are you saying his parents are part of Hamas, right? Like, let's start asking these questions, because when you put the labels on them, that's the thing about narrative. Like, we might go to DuckDuckGo, and depending on the reader, they're reading this Ivy League anti-Palestinian leader, whatever that quote, and whatever platform you're reading from, that narrative is being promoted, and people are hearing it, and they're agreeing with everything that they're hearing, because these are the influences. The news media is influencing you to think about this individual in this type of way. So how do we respond to that? Hey, this guy came out while he was in school and said, I'm against this thing, right?
Yep.
Could he have known that October 7th was going to happen when he was filling out his visa application? Right? That becomes the question. Could he have known? And it happened, and we're talking about with all these students, not just him. Could they have known? Should they have known that this was going to happen? and then be penalized
It's
for it.
impossible.
It's
Again, this guy's a grad student at Columbia University. You know,
But
okay, great. You want immigrants who are going to rise and become something in this country. So this guy is here as a grad student, um,
what's the
and
quote?
obviously, based on what you're saying, this guy overcame like crazy obstacles since childhood,
What's the
to
marketing?
come and become a grad student, and now he is um now he's an Ivy League anti-Israel ringleader. It's just so
Right?
much bullshit, so much
Send
bullshit.
you're poorest, you're homeless, right? You're destitute.
Yeah,
Send me those, right, to the land of opportunity. And when you come here, this is the labels and the things that they use you for
yeah.
to drive quote unquote uh, pro-Semitism or pro-Zionist narratives.
I think one of the more also just kind of moving the ball a little bit over here, getting back to his op-ed. One of the most beautiful things I love about what he's doing here is that he's being persecuted, but he's not calling out the feds as much as he is directing all of this at the institution that's actually enabling all this to happen, Columbia University, right? Um, he states the logic used by the federal government to target myself and my peers is a direct extension of Columbia's repression playbook concerning Palestine. Holy shit. Like, how beautiful and how powerful is that? Like, they, this is what happens when you mess with the wrong people, right? Um, he's being persecuted, but he is emblematic of what is happening. And he's using what's happening to him, and coincidentally, they've given him a platform. This may not be the platform we want him to have, but he is accepting of the situation that he's currently in. And he's just like any person that comes from a refugee camp, from childhood, to make it and survive and make a future and a life for themselves. They're not going to take for granted, and they understand through oppression there's even still opportunity to make better of the situation. You know, I think that was an incredible initiating step in this op-ed.
I think
the,
with his, I think with him having a child on the way, that's also a factor, right?
Yeah.
And how he responds to this, and because history says, "Well, Dad, what did you do?" Right?
Yep.
What did you do? How did you respond to that? How did you shape the world before I got here?
Yep.
and I think
Yep.
for me, that's like a very important thing to surface in the conversations and the debate and in the rhetoric. The issue of Israel and Palestine, like that's what I said. What I said in the beginning. Like for me, this is somebody who's putting on the table. Look, this is what's happening, and it's created a humanitarian crisis. Is devastating the lives of thousands and thousands of people, and you know we need to do something about this. We need to change this. And it has, it started somewhere. And for me, uh, you know, it resonates with me because of because of the community that I come from. When there was a civil war in Central America, and it's in El Salvador specifically, there were folks who did what he did, and there are people who changed and made demands on the U.S. government to stop funding the war in El Salvador. The Reagan administration, according to the Congressman Muckley investigations, found that it was putting $1 million every day in the hands of military dictatorships and the governments that were very repressive, and you know um, that resulted in thousands and thousands of people's lives. Uh, that just disappeared, but it had a lasting impact on generations. And if it wasn't for people like that acted in the way that this student acted, maybe we wouldn't even be here. And it's so ironic that that was done with the pretext, oh, we don't want communism to spread all over Central America. Well, how ironic is it that now the best ally of the United States is, someone who's invading another country, right? Uh, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, and that's just why, you know, we need to take a look at that too. Like, this was a made problem, from the late 30s, early 40s, when the partition of, Palestine, occurred. And we must not forget that this didn't just happen out of the blue.
Yep. One of the things that I want to highlight was that so last month when all this basically happened with Mahmoud Khalil, there was a press conference the following Friday, and in that press conference, this law professor from the city of New York, and he's one of Mahmoud Khalil's attorneys, Ramzi Qasim. He said something which is prolific and describes everything over here. The thing to highlight here is that the Trump administration plainly intends to punish, penalize, silence, and suppress speech that it dislikes. And right now, it happens to be pro-Palestinian speech of the sort that Mahmoud espoused. Then he goes on to add, he says, the plan is to start with what the Trump administration believes is the low-hanging fruit of Palestinian activists, and then apply that template to other issues, other forms of speech that they happen to dislike because their own political viewpoints. And then he goes on to highlight whether it's speech in support of our LGBTQ friends and relatives, whether it's speech that supports reproductive rights, and this is exactly what it is. A lot of the times when I talk to our communities, as a Muslim advocate, talking to Muslim communities who are famously conservative and separate themselves, at least the more conservative auntie and uncle versions of these communities tend to separate themselves and be like, oh no, this is where we can't do, organize with LGBTQIA people. I'm like, man, when you actually show up to an action, God bless the LGBTQIA communities, bro. Like they understand how to organically move against oppressive structures in this country, as well as our Black comrades do as well. And these are all categories of people that are attacked by the same category of people: colonist racists that are espousing fascism to wipe out anything that doesn't necessarily look like them, or disempower anything that doesn't look like them. So I thought that was beautiful that these are the people that are legally behind Mahmoud Khalil and are actually currently have the microphone right now. And this is how we can, this is what we need to listen to and move with and under.
So I have a question, right? And this is the question I've been asking folks for a long time. Is it only Trump, right? Or is this a Trump thing, or is this an agenda thing? Is this the American agenda from the government when it comes to these groups of people? When you see they laid a foundation for Trump to do these things before he gets installed. We spoke last year about a bill they try to pass to make organizing, right? Speak pro-Palestinian organizations be labeled as terrorist groups prior to him being the president. We know that in the Cop City cases, people are being charged with RICO, right? We know, and we had the support from the Biden administration on in a lot of these cases, right? We saw these things happening in albeit the same thing, but in a different manner, right? We might see the same thing with a smoother, less vocal, less uh, overt racism, right? And it'll, oh, I'll shake your hand. and tell you that I like you, but we're going to label this as any support for Palestine should be labeled as support of a terrorist group. It's not saying you're supporting Hamas. Is the entire Palestine Hamas? Right?
Yep.
Like now we have to literally ask ourselves these questions. Is Trump the problem, or are we not responding to the entire problem the same way we will respond to Trump?
Well, I mean, how did we get Trump? By having a fucked up Democratic ticket, by constantly capitulating to a political process that demands we choose between the lesser of two evils, and we can never be given the absolute choice. Like when Senator Sanders was running, right? The Democrats literally did Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She did everything she could to disempower the Sanders campaign and hand the keys to Hillary Clinton, who did not get it deservingly, right? And we lost that. Didn't learn our lesson from that. Politically, we're told to decide between two parties, and one historically has been capitulating to the demands of the other so much that when you call people centrists, they're already far into the right because they've shifted that center over time and over history. So one of many answers to your question is, well, yeah, our political structure and our need as a country to just choose the lesser of two evils. The evil, it will always be the right. But when the left has shifted so far into the right that the center no longer exists, we only have the right to choose from, right? And it's pure insanity what we have to do. There's an uncommitted movement, which I thought was pretty good. You have the Green Party, which I have opinions about, not a topic to share about right now. But there are ways to basically try and build out a community that's going to constantly resist and try and push back against a two-party system. Would love to have that conversation at some point. That'd be a completely different topic and podcast, which we should do. We should have.
Yeah.
But a answer is our political process is so shitty. There are many others. Anyway.
Yeah. I think another way to look at this and to answer that question for me is look at the systems that are utilized to express the dominant ideology. The dominant ideology basically is one. There's no more of this secular nation will be tolerant of other religions, right? So Christian nationalism. Like God has put us in power and we run the show, right? And all the systems that have been created and that will be created in the future have to, express, this ideology. And you could see it in our political system, first and foremost, in our economic system and, our healthcare system, and all the systems that are supposed to work for us. And that's something that I think about. How is it that this ideology has become part of the mainstream? I mean, I remember when I first came to this country, like people are like, these are on the fringes, this is just crazy people. I don't know if I remember when I come from immigrant rights organizing. I remember when the Tea Party surfaced, the Minutemen surfaced, and they came and went. But this thing is way different. And in fact, one of the things that they talked about today, you could just Google the snippets of Fox News, and that's all they talk about. How God has put them in power, and if you don't obey, then you're the demon and you need to be destroyed, basically. And we'll use all the systems that we have in our disposal to align people, and it's either you're with us or you're against us. And therefore, if you're against us, you'll be destroyed. And I think that's important, to point out and to recognize, and to realize that it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, history, has shown us many lessons, but maybe we haven't learned, the lessons that we should have learned. And that's maybe one of the places that we need to start. A lot of the political education, a lot of the history, that we need to relearn to learn for the new for the new generation, that and take a look at what happened because of ideologies like this, and but
Yeah.
also take a look at, well, examine these questions. What about the Constitution? What about the separation of church and state? What about the separation of powers?
Yeah, I mean, all that's gone to shit, right? Because the reason why all that has gone to shit is because look at what Trump is doing. He will be told by a judge, and he'll just truck that shit. And there's no teeth. No one's going to go after him because the Supreme Court has already allowed him presidential immunity, executive immunity or whatever they call that shit, already from the shit that he did from Trump 1.0. So now we have Trump 2.0 with fucking Stephen Miller, who is truly amped now, who is looking like fucking Joseph Goebbels and shit like that, and just going off. And these guys look fucking so empowered right now. The funny thing is, like, my daughters right now, they're learning a little bit about history and about World War II. And so, they're really learning and understanding about Hitler and all this stuff. And it was crazy because I'm sitting here and they watched this one video that profiled all of the leadership of the Third Reich, right? And like what happened to them and how history views them right now. What really got me was, at the time, the Third Reich in power were so supported. So supported. There was obviously a population that disagreed with them through the 30s and stuff like that. But through political dissent and chaos, like these people were squashed. How did that happen? How empowered did these leaders feel in that time? Now, we're talking about the extreme, right? The current party, this Trump 2.0 administration, the Trump Second Reich, is they're useful idiots for the Republican Party, essentially, right? And even the Democratic Party. This is all my opinion, but in my opinion, these guys are useful idiots for the Republican Party. They'll take what they have been knuckle dragging forever as far as fighting against our civil rights and civil liberties, with the few things that were passed in the 60s, and slowly, like, dismantling it over time, dragging progress out. And now you have a useful idiot who could just run in there and just shatter and break glass and take all the blame because he's stupid enough to. And history will look at Trump unfavorably, when it was really, again, I'm ranting, but really it was this whole process that's leading us to look at this two-party system.
But let me try to interject here too. So we've seen the headlines, we see it on the 24-hour news cycle. What do you think is their end game here?
Well, I'll tell you, I got an idea for that.
Wait. Let me hear what Karim said. And I don't say it just for the sake of, like,
Screw
I want
Karim, I got a lot to say here.
the conversation, but really, and I think it's so connected to what Karim is asking. Is this Trump, or is this a much bigger problem because we have so many people that want to be like Trump? What
Trump
is
is a useful idiot, though. He's a useful idiot.
Karim?
The useful idiot statement basically signifies what they call a puppet, right? So when you have, just like these NBA players that are silent on social issues because they get the check, right? Trump establishes his family and his legacy through doing the dirty work of career politicians. The tariffs, the deportations to Panama, to El Salvador, to all of these places, right? These are things that do not happen overnight. If you go and look at Joe Biden passing the LA Declaration, right? The signing of the LA Declaration, which is what ended up authorizing Trump to house people in El Salvador, send people to Panama, put these deportation flights, because all the countries in the Americas have agreed to the LA Declaration on migration. So this tool is what laid the foundation and was already in place for him to do it. Just like building a wall. That was something 40 years before Trump became president. He's not, he's the to quote C-Mob, the useful idiot. He is riling all of these things up. My thing is the end goal, because I use the court system just like they use the court system. They have an interpretation of law. I don't believe, in my opinion, that any of the decisions from the Supreme Court or any of these courts are favorable to Donald Trump. What they're doing is reinforcing habeas, stating that immigrants have due process, right? And they're entitled to due process. So before you can remove them, they have to have an opportunity and a day in court. So this is pushing the court system to establish rights and protections, whether we like it, and how he's going about it. Because when you have the other administration, we don't have the same system. Trump is backing up the court system. All of these appeals going all the way to the Supreme Court is going to backlog the court system or force them to make decisions on what are immigrant rights supposed to look like. What is what are the religious rights? What is the constitutional rights that are still available? Is the First Amendment still alive? Mm-hmm. Right? Because they will have to answer that question. Is what does due process look like? It is being forced. You're forcing the system to spit it out. This is what we have. This is the protection that you have. So yeah, you sent those guys to those prisons. Can they sue you for sending them to those prisons in violation of due process? The Supreme Court just told you, you violated their due process. Mm-hmm. What are their lawyers going to actually do? None of these lawyers that I'm seeing in any of these cases have said, you know what, we're going to sue the government for damages.
For violation of due process. Like
for violation of due process.
So those are literally our innate rights. You don't have to be a citizen.
So let me
have due process rights.
So let me get this. Let me try to get this right. So, is the end goal to try to bend the law as much as it is possible to their advantage?
Michelle Alexander told us in the new Jim Crow what was up.
Are they bending the law?
It's not bending the law; it's mutilating it. It's mutilating. It's smoke. It's smoke and mirrors to basically slowly chip away at rights that are inalienable.
Right. So they have a thing called a stay of removal and deportation proceedings. So when you file for a stay of removal, they say, well, the government could bring you back, so go ahead and send him back to that country anyway, because we can return him under McKen versus Holder. So usually a court will say, okay, since he can reopen his case at any time and he can be returned if he prevails, we'll go ahead and let you deport this individual, right? In 2025, the government just argued and told the judge, hey, you don't have jurisdiction over a foreign nation. You cannot tell the foreign nation when to return this person. So you're basically saying that Supreme Court decision in the McKen versus Holder has no weight. So now you're telling the courts that you should give automatic stays to everybody because the court will no longer have jurisdiction if this person is actually deported. You're giving people a layup if they realize that you just gave them a layup by arguing that dumb shit that you just argued, right?
And Trump is the dunker.
when you go in, that has been the thing. How do we get DACA? And why is DACA still the conversation, right? DACA was a policy, right? He's actually, by his actions, is turning DACA into a damn law, right? A right to deferred action by having these decisions by the court. making the court make a decision and given even in the dissent, Sotomayor told you what it is. They're giving you exactly what is the blueprint for what you need to do. My question is, will these lawyers go do it and then make Congress, because usually what Congress does, if they don't like something, they will have to go respond and make a new law and put it on the books. So if they don't like what the Supreme Court says, Congress gets to respond. Cool, no problem, do it. The thing about it is the country is being forced into a shape of whatever the agenda is. You can tell by what they're doing. This whole tariff thing and bringing factories into America and putting them in the South, in Louisiana, Alabama, and all these places, right? Because that's where they're going. Where
This is anti-NAFTA, anti-CAFTA, and DR. Like, then that's the ironic thing to me, that what's being done today is so anti what they, government decided to do 20 years ago. Trade agreements that, allow the U.S. market to enter into our countries, right? And now they're saying, no, wait a minute, we want them back.
Well,
like, which is it? Like, at the end of the day,
who consumes more than America? Who consumes more than America?
Right.
So
that's why I wonder, like, what's the end game? Like, oh, look, you could be like me, you could be a billionaire and own everything, including the government. Is that what it is?
The end game is leverage, right? Because if I can leverage, if the customer is always right, and I can say, I'm not going to buy that for that price, right? If we can say we're the customer is basically saying America is the customer, right? And the tariffs are going to say, if you want to sell your products, how are you going to sell your products? And to whom are you going to sell your products?
Yeah.
He recognized.
We need to do a time check because we could go on and on and on.
Yeah,
and I know that we still have like a few things to talk about in the podcast. But again, I am not a constitutional rights expert, and most certainly I'm not a Muslim studies expert. But I could read, I could try to understand history.
But you are a human being with a heart.
Yeah, right. About all the people. And I wonder, like, and I think history has shown us, look at what happened during the Vietnam War. The students, how they raised up and challenged, what was going on, because literally they were losing their lives. Again, this fight against communism, and what happened in Central America. Peasants, students, women, teachers, rose, and a lot of those countries said, not more, not anymore. That's not going to happen. This is what democracy really looks like, from the bottom up. And I think for me, that's kind of what we need to look at. The Columbia students of the world, the Tufts University student of the world, and many, many others, the immigrants that got caught in this massive operation in Boston.
The students whose visas are being withdrawn as we speak. And are being left less than 15 days to leave the country because their student visas have been just suddenly revoked in the hundreds, and every day those numbers are escalating.
And for me, it's like, okay, like, we need to learn, our lesson from history. We need to have this political education moments, but we need to take action too. We need to be strategic. We need to do, things differently, obviously, because whatever we were being told to do in the last 25 years, mainly was go elect your friends, to be leaders in the Democratic Party and change things from within. That certainly hasn't worked out so well, but we need to do things differently, but also not lose hope, continue to have that light at the end of the tunnel to keep that flame alive, because that's the only thing we've got.
Word.
I feel like that's the only thing we've got.
I like your two closing questions over here. How do you push back and who's pushing back? Um, in my humble opinion, how do you push back links directly with who is pushing back. Everyone needs to support the student activists out there. Base and center support around the courage of these kids. Everyone needs to basically support their local uh, leaders and activists out there that have been doing this work for a long time. God knows uh, when they pass, it leaves a chasm. So connect with those leaderships in your areas and connect with the student activists in your areas. Support the courage behind these kids and the thought leaders that have been doing this work. But definitely start locally. That's my answer for that.
I definitely agree with that. 1,000%. I always tell a story about my first time speaking at Harvard and my intention of going to go tear the institution down because I just knew this is Harvard and it's this high up, right, on an institutional ladder. And I spoke to a activist friend of mine, Kimberly Jones, and she said, "No, don't do that. You know, you're going there and you're speaking in front of students, right? Future lawyers, the future people that will help shape the direction of where this country is going, shape what our rights look like, and you have to bring them in. You have to tell them, hey, you know, this is how it's being done right now, but you can do it differently, right? Basically, creating movement lawyers rather than capital gain attorneys, right? So and I changed my speech to basically correct, hey, student, when you get out of law school and you get with the firm or you get with the nonprofit organization, don't let them tell you to disregard everything that you've learned. Don't allow them to tell you to disregard human rights that you've learned, how to protect human rights. Don't disregard those things. And that's been the practice, in my experience, of attorneys disregarding human rights. I've seen attorneys sue for lawyer fees, but never for damages for the victims in the cases that they represented. And I think a lot of that can change and shape how the government proceeds because they'll be held accountable. So how you fight, who is fighting, and the duty of how we're passing this information along is key because people are being misinformed at a high rate and people are being told how to think because in most cases, folks are lazy. Nobody wants to go read that 3,000 page uh, bill that they've proposed and go see the nooks and crannies of all the violations in it. So they want somebody to tell them, what does that say? So the people, those of us that are going to read the 3,000 pages and dissect each section, you know, put your political motivations aside, and whether you're with this party or that party, say what the thing actually is, and say how it'll work against the people and not the parties.
Well, I think there's a lot more that we need to talk about, and not just talked about. Again, I think that we learn. For me, like we need to learn from history. We need to have political education. We need to move people from, just marching on the streets, which is great. Like that one action, but what's the strategy? And to keep like Sima says, supporting the immigrant families that are caught up in this mess, the students, the people who disagree with these things that have a big target on their backs, because that's what solidarity looks like, and that's history has shown us that works. And so we will have, people who are leaders, who are thought leaders, but are actually, looking at the systems, themselves. And these are people that come from the communities that are affected. So stay tuned for the second part of this conversation in our next episode. But before we go, what is the Immigration Corner conversation today?
We got Crimmigration by Crimmigration.
Remember,
Tell us what's up today, man.
what's up today? We're gonna just review briefly that there's a groundwork laid out for the Muslim ban. Trump did the Muslim ban 1, 2, and 3 in 2017, and it was challenged in court, New York and Washington, by the ACLU. The New York case went all the way to the Supreme Court, but they ruled in the favor of the Trump administration because he reworked what the Muslim ban said. Right? He rewrote and put out 1, 2, and 3 versions of it till he perfected something for the court to accept that was legal. On the other side of it is the reunification of families that um, never got fully litigated, but we have the templates of what to do in the event that he puts out another Muslim ban and how to get the temporary restraining orders. Also, at the pace that he's going, the courts aren't will not give him a whole lot of action. They will put out a TRO in 2.1 seconds because they're challenging the judges and using social media to disrespect the judges and telling a judge that they don't have jurisdiction and we don't care what you say. So that is you're antagonizing a federal judge that is not an employee of the government that you cannot fire, and they will be sitting for a long time. So that's one of the beauties of it. And when we get back on the podcast with our guests, we'll dive more into the crimmigration corner and how we can use those cases.
Nice. Well, and with our next segment, we usually do a thing called Of the Month, where we highlight something and of the month. Today, and I started the podcast telling you guys like I'm coming in and I'm feeling blue. Woke up this morning, my eyes were absolutely dry. My tear glands were a desert, basically. Just bawled and cried my eyes out yesterday. We lost a really, really, really important figure, not only in the city of Portland, but even broader when it comes to the police accountability movement. So today we dedicate our of the month to Organizer of the Month, and it's in memoriam of Dan Handelman of Portland Cop Watch and Peace and Justice Works, who passed away yesterday at the age of 60 from a stroke. It's difficult coming up with words, so I'm going to steal a description of Dan, since he was a really humble guy. He didn't speak about himself, didn't do much in the way of bio for himself really ever. So the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, who held a policing justice workshop and panel last year, which is beautifully run, had a bio for him. And this is it. Dan Handelman is a co-founding member of Peace and Justice Works and is the Police Accountability Project Group Portland Cop Watch. In 1991, he also helped co-found Flying Focus Video Collective, which has produced a program on cable access every week on social justice topics. I miss cable access. That stuff was fun. Dan attended nearly every police oversight meeting in the city since 1992. He was appointed to sit on 4 city commissions looking at the oversight system. I was honored to have served with him as a police accountability commissioner for almost 2 years recently. Mayor Katz work group in 2000, on stakeholder groups in 2010 and 2016, and the one I just mentioned, the Police Accountability Commission from 21 to 23. He is a member of the steering committee of the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. For me, it's he was not only just like a friend and a colleague, but he was absolutely a mentor. He was there at the inception of my organizing, the beginning of my career as an organizer, and had mentored me a lot about the processes of police accountability and being able to find a way to protect immigrant communities. Um, the need to be able to pick up the phone and dial 911 and have proper representation show up um, is something that we strive for. So Dan pioneered, police oversight in the city of Portland, pretty much in my eyes, and mentored many in its movement, including myself. So losing him is devastating not only for us, but the city of Portland and police oversight in the nation in itself. He was a kind and dear to all, but his most overlooked quality was his humor and his isms and testimonies and speeches. Um, I'm mostly short on words to go further at this moment and huge on feelings, but may his work resonate and may we be as dogged as he was in maintaining the legacy of him and his work. That's a wrap for this week. And so we're coming back soon. We want to share those plans with you guys. We have we're working on a few guests that we have lined up for to continue our topic that we started on today. Again, I think it's a crazy important topic of being able to talk about persecution of activism in the immigrant communities and movement builders and its leaders. And look forward to continuing that conversation and topic in the next podcast, which probably should be about a week from now. I don't know if it's concrete. Feels soon.
But soon.
Yep, but it'll be soon.
It'll be soon.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Krim.
Appreciate y'all.